This is the 5th annual Bournemouth Air Festival, and organisers are expecting tens of thousands of people to come along to the seafront and watch the displays. Now, the festival was opened by the Red Arrows here this afternoon, and watching them is incredibly memorable on any occasion. But it was very special too today for the pilots, because it's the first time they've been back to Bournemouth since their teammate, Flight Lieutenant John Egging, was killed in a crash following a display here last year. The Charles Street development is being built in 2 phases, and this is the first. It'll house the new district council offices and also the Dorchester Library. Now, opposite across the road from this is phase 2, and this is getting £60 million of private investment to build a shopping complex and an underground car park. The problem is that the developers say that that's no longer viable in the present economic climate, so it's gone back to the council to ask it to approve changes to the plans. Unemployment is at its highest point for 2 years, with more than 2.5 million people out of work. In the Portsmouth area alone, 11,000 people are trying to find a job. Only last week in Southampton, they advertised for 16 refuse workers and received more than 500 applications. When paramedics and fire crews first arrived on the scene this morning, all 3 men had managed to get out of the helicopter. In fact, 2 of them were about where I'm standing now. And tonight, I can still smell the aviation fuel. It's seeped into the ground around me. Above, the branches have been sliced through by the rotor blades of the helicopter. One police officer said today that he thought it was amazing. It hadn't just burst into flames on impact, and everyone had managed to get out. Well, this involves a 15-year-old girl. She can't be named for legal reasons, but she's being called Child A. Now, she has autism, and child psychologists have assessed her as having a mental age of below 7. They say that she's very mature and she's very vulnerable. This form, written by a social worker, says Mr. Longhurst should be deprived of his liberty and effectively forced to stay in hospital for his own safety until he can be looked after properly elsewhere. But it goes on to say this should not be necessary for more than a few days. That was a month ago, and Mr. Longhurst is still in hospital. Addressing the jury, the prosecution said the defendants had planned to steal his laptop to pay for them to go to a rave. Christopher Parker QC said they also took his bank card and beat his PIN number out of him. He said Jamie was then held in the flat until the following day, when on Good Friday, shortly before midday, he was tortured to death by the 4 defendants. A few weeks ago, people were parking their cars on these fields during the Wimborne Folk Festival, but today it looks more like a lake. And looking at this gate, you get some sense of just how deep the water is. That's right, Sally. This was supposed to be the jewel in the crown of the Spinnaker Tower, a glass lift offering spectacular views over the Solent, but it's never carried a paying passenger. At its opening in 2005, the lift jammed 100 feet in the air. Well, it's been a nerve-wracking morning, Danny, for students and their parents right across the south. Some schools and colleges are actually choosing to post the A-level results online, so you could log on as early as 7 a.m. and find out how you'd done. But at Andover College, they were going for the more traditional method, turning up, getting your results in an envelope, and I went along to speak to some of the students and find out what I've been sounding out on the Portland coastline. We don't know exactly how many people are taking part, but we do know that there are more than 2,100, enough to break the world record, and we've got to stand here for 10 minutes. This is Littlehampton, surrounded by water, and probably one of the last places in the country that you'd expect a hosepipe ban, and it's left many people bemused. Volunteers say it takes a lot of courage to go to the food bank and ask for help, but more and more people are having to do it. 4 times as many are walking through this door today compared to when it opened 11 months ago. Because Facebook's a US company, the High Court ruling means it's not compelled to pass on the details, but it has agreed to do so. It means Nicola can now bring a private prosecution against the online bullies, and this will be the first case of its kind. They'll be using this to find them. It's vinegar, diluted with water, but ordinary, everyday vinegar. and it has an amazing effect on the body. As Neil's blood sugar levels change, so does the smell of his breath or skin. It's a tiny transformation, but Roots can detect it and warn him something's about to happen. For these youngsters, this is their first lesson, but it's been running in the school for 6 years, and teachers say massage is having very positive effects.